Well, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about basically how I like to hunt the wind, or even some things I learned while I went up to Tennessee on the velvet hunt, or not learned, but really got to see firsthand, um, just about access and hunting the wind, and when to hunt, when not to hunt, things like that. So let's get into it. First thing, up there in Tennessee, we got permission on a lot of little small properties. Um, so access was limited, like, in how we could access was limited. And then some of the properties, like Derek had picked up over the past few years, he's been hunting for several years. It almost becomes habit, like me showing up, never hunting these properties. Um, we go to preset some stands and things like that. And I'm like, so I could see, like, we're not gonna kill these bucks pulling up to park. That the only time a truck is parked there is when somebody's going in the woods hunting them, and things like that. The deer clearly already gonna have that place patterned, or the hunting pattern on the property that's been hunted a couple years. And then on top of that, leading up to the hunt, the wind was out of the north or east up until the day before the hunt, and then it switched out of the south with the warm front coming through. So we know the wind's going to be swirling in the evenings, and a lot of people, especially early season, just want to hunt evenings when it's cooler and whatever the reason. But I basically said from day one, we're not going to see a mature buck in the evenings, because they're not going to be getting up on their feet moving out any place we could hunt. Because keep in mind, we're hunting small little pieces of private, so maybe the bucks bedded on the property, maybe not. A lot of times they weren't. We knew they would be bedded off the property, but coming onto the property to feed at night, or just to feed in general. Um, so these places we put cell cameras. I mean, we're getting a lot of big bucks, but nothing would be in the evenings. You'd have them there, say, an hour and a half after dark. You would start getting pictures, and then they would, hit and miss all night long. And then an hour and a half after daylight, pretty much all the buck activity was done. So I knew if we were going to kill anything, we had to hunt mornings, and nobody wanted to hunt mornings. But going back to access, it's no different, public or private. Public, I think we have a lot more options when it comes to our access, because a lot of times we're working with bigger properties, and we can park in a different area, or loop around, do different things, and we're not doing the same thing every time to where we're patterned. Like, one of the biggest bucks on the piece of property up there, we had seen him, saw him multiple times. I had a bunch of pictures of him, but we went in to hunt. I think it was the last morning. Yeah, it was the last morning. I basically talked them into going to hunt. So we went in and all just sat on the ground in different areas, trying to catch the bucks coming back, going back to bed. Basically, we were sitting on different fence lines on the property, and anyway, we saw some bucks, didn't shoot anything. Well, we get back up there to the truck, and one of the biggest ones, was laying on a little hillside, like 25 yards from the truck, probably. And that's what he did. He just monitored that. So I mean, those bucks knew we were there before we ever even got out of the truck. And then on one of the cameras, we had some minerals out at a camera, just taking pictures on a property we wasn't really planning on hunting. But one of the mornings I ran over there, and basically just to see what would happen. But I have mud tires on my truck, so I'm making noise coming down the road. But there's traffic everywhere. But there's multiple deer, 3 or 4 nice bucks in front of the camera. And this is 30 minutes, 45 minutes before daylight. As soon as I slow down and pull in, you can see the deer start getting alert on camera, and they're 700-800 yards from where I pulled in, across the hill and down the bottom. Like they don't see no lights. It's strictly sound, but they know if a vehicle pulls in there, somebody's fixing to come in there. So you start seeing them, a few disappear here and there, and then 10-15 minutes before legal shooting light, there's nothing in front of the camera anymore. They've left. But if we had a different access, to where we're not pulling in there in the same spot every time, or we can come around, loop around, then the deer they wouldn't spook. It would be, just another morning, and we would catch them basically leaving the feed, coming back to bed, or whatever the situation. But the deer pattern us way more than we can pattern them, and then the bucks aren't gonna be comfortable moving when they can't trust their nose moving any distance. So they're laying somewhere where it's thick, and they're probably getting up. Y'all have said before, I don't believe there's any nocturnal deer, but if he has pressure or danger, he's going to be in a small area. But they're laying, and the bucks are bachelored up, velvet hunt. But they're laying in a thick area to where they can stand up and browse on some woody browse or something. They're not standing up and running straight out to feed or bean fields or whatever. And if the wind's swirling, there's no way you're going to get close to those areas without alerting them in the evenings. And then up there, there's so many deer. The morning time access, you almost have to come through a bedding area or something where there's not any deer in that bedding area to be able to set up to hunt them coming back to bed. Because if you walk through any type of field or feed or anything like that, there's just deer blowing and running everywhere. So I really didn't learn anything. I just got to see it up close and personal firsthand 3 or 4 days in a row. But it's going to be, so take that information and come to Florida Public. We have less deer, so our access is actually easier because we're not running into herds of 50 deer. But it's no different in the evening times. A lot of guys, and I understand going to the wood, wanting to go to the woods, whether conditions are good or bad, and sit in a tree, it's relaxing. I get that 100%. But if we're trying to kill that big buck, then trying to move in and set up when the wind's swirling and it's just going every way, it's not going to happen, and you're just making him move even less. You're probably restricting his daylight movement, and and then they become spookier. So mornings, say an hour and a half after dark, the wind kind of dies down and gets more steady. You don't have the swirling, the heat pockets, and all the different things that cause the air to swirl. So through the night, the wind's kind of steady, and then once the sun starts hitting the ground, basically, 8:15, 8:30, 40, then you'll start seeing that wind swirling again. That next day, that next morning. But you still have, almost, depending on where you're at, 2 hours of legal shooting light before the wind starts swirling. So that's obviously going to be your best chance at killing a mature buck. But access becomes the biggest part. You almost have to know where he is, or somehow you have to know you're not just bumping deer that are going to run by and blowing and all that. And a lot of that you can do strictly off terrain, and where we have big cypress ponds and things like that, you can access through the cypress ponds to where there's not a deer out there. Basically, there's not a deer out there walking belly deep in the water, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be out somewhere where it's comfortable for them. But access access is even on those, even on them private little pieces where I would almost say the deer aren't wild. Look, they don't act like the bucks do here. It's it's a totally different world up there. But they know when a truck pulls in that's gonna basically hunt them, they start vanishing. They disappear and you won't see them. And then in the evenings, if you know that wind's swirling all over the place, they're not gonna come out there. They're not gonna do anything until they can trust their nose. So basically, hunting evenings is just a waste of time until you get a good consistent wind. And if we're going back to Florida, as far zone D gets some consistent winds early, being that far north. But as far as the rest of the state, like I've barely got a consistent wind in archery season in the past 5 years. You know, one day towards the end of the season or something. It almost doesn't happen for an evening. Now you can kind of, if they're rutting and traveling a long ways, then it doesn't matter as much because you never know when one's just gonna come through, and you'll catch that wind. But if they're not moving far, it's early season. There's no rut. They're not moving far. If that wind's swirling, it's just a waste of time. The best bet would be mornings, and access is everything. You know, we don't have like Tennessee has the ridges and bottoms and everything, so I can access is, I would say, a lot easier because I can just get off the side of the ridge and come around and things like that, where Florida is basically flat, most of it anyway. So deer can see you a lot farther and things like that. So I have to use the stick and use water and use basically things I know where deer aren't going to be at nighttime to access, and I've talked about that in other videos. But early season, you really don't see me hunt any evenings. I mean, I rarely hunt evenings, period. But especially not early season, because it's just a waste of time. You're not gonna see anything when the wind's blowing your scent everywhere. And with the cameras we were running in Tennessee, we had a bunch of cell cameras up, still do. In the morning times, like on the properties we wouldn't go to, the deer would be all over in front of the camera, big bucks, until an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at most after daylight, but they were comfortable. So if we would have just had a good access, then guys could have shot some big bucks in the morning times. But I think that's something people hunting private get into a routine where you may drive a side by side or four wheeler or truck or whatever to a certain spot and park and walk down here and get in a stand. Well, the bucks already have you patterned. If you've done it, you know, if you've done it 1 year, they patterned you. If you've done it more than 2 years, like, they obviously have you patterned. So if in a situation like that, then I would just do something completely different. And chances are I would kill whatever buck I was after. You know, if you're hunting, if I'm hunting a 500,000 acre piece of public and there's 1,000 guys hunting it, break that pressure up per acre, and that's not a lot. If I'm me and one other guy is hunting a 25 acre block or a 50 acre block of private, then 2 guys on 50 acres, that's a lot of pressure. I have to consider all those things, as it's not doing me any good just to blow the deer out and let them know I'm there and everything else. I feel like I can get away with a whole lot more in the morning time than in the evening. And anybody that's hunted any length of time, I'm sure, have seen deer come out in the evenings where they'll take a few steps and stand there for a long time, where they'll basically come out to an edge and basically just stand there listening and looking and smelling for however long, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, because they're not as comfortable. But in the morning times, you really don't see that. They're just being natural. They think they're completely safe because they've been there all night long. And being able to hear anything, smell anything, see anything. And if you can sneak in that bubble or get between them and their bed in the morning time, then the chances just go up drastically. And that's basically what I hunt for almost year round. Like on the first Tennessee video I did, I'd only been on that property the one time during turkey season, but I'm walking in and I used a little flashlight and just basically held it at my feet. And I didn't really know where the deer would be, but I didn't expect them to come across the highway. So basically the bedding area was really close to the highway. So I was expecting there was a crop field off the one side, and they'd be out there somewhere. So when I went in, I basically walked up to the bedding area and just kind of skirted around it, and then basically set up in it, but right on the edge of the thick. And then those bucks, came back in, and they're coming to bed just as natural and relaxed as could be. And they wasn't giant bucks or anything. It was just 2-year-olds. I feel I would have been, if it would have been a 5-year-old 160-inch buck, I would have still been successful. And that's what I set up for. It just happened there wasn't a 5-year-old buck there, but I had no way of knowing. But I'm gonna do that whether I'm hunting Florida, Tennessee, whatever state I'm hunting. It's gonna be the same way. And just around here local or in Florida, I know the terrain and know the area. I kind of know how I can access, and I may access a different way each time I hunt. And I make a lot of mistakes and spook deer and spook bucks I'm after. I know I do. But I don't think there's many times when I'm in the woods that I'm not close to that big buck I'm wanting to shoot. But the wind and access is everything. I don't think there's any, I'm just going to hunt evenings early season, or I'm just going to hunt mornings early season, or I'm just going to do this. You have to adapt to everything. Like, you need to hunt when the best time is to hunt. And that's going to be when the wind is consistent. If there's absolutely no wind, sometimes you have that, it's so calm your ears ring. Deer don't like that. You don't see deer on that dead calm. So there needs to be a little bit of wind to make a deer feel comfortable, and they're wanting to trust their nose, so they want a steady wind too. But I can almost guarantee outside a rut and a buck doing something stupid, a mature buck is not going to come walking out to a food source or something an hour before dark with the wind swirling. Now it can kind of kick different ways, but it still has a steady direction. But as far as Central Florida to South Florida, I rarely ever see a consistent wind and consistent enough to hunt in the evening. Now going up to zone D and stuff, especially like when you get around Halloween, then you just get them cold fronts and get real good consistent winds, and hunting evening's great. But as far as around the house, zone C, zone B, I almost won't hunt an evening. I don't remember the last time I hunted an evening, honestly, because it's just a waste of time. I won't even have in places I don't have any pressure, where I have cell cameras. When the wind's swirling, I won't even get a picture till an hour and a half after dark. It'd be when I'll get my first buck on camera. And that's the same thing I was seeing in Tennessee. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful and just makes you think about where you're hunting and your access. And good luck this year. We'll see you on the next one.